Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I've got some pretty exciting news and details to share about some future plans that the ESO developers have for guilds in the Elder Scrolls Online. For those who may not have been aware, the ESO devs hosted a Guild Summit event on the official ESO Discord server where guild masters and guild officers were given the chance to attend a variety of stages and breakout rooms to not only chat about guild management tips and practices, but engage in discussions with the developers about their plans for ESO guilds going forward. Guilds are often referred to as being the lifeblood of the Elder Scrolls Online, and any MMO for that matter. They give players a reason to continue to log in and engage with the game and the community. So I think it's great that ESO's guild system is being looked at so that it can eventually be improved upon. As someone who's been participating in ESO's guild scene for over 6 years now and has been running a trading and community guild of her own for a couple years, I think that some updates and changes are long overdue. And it was really refreshing to be able to get the chance to hear the developers speak pretty openly and candidly about their plans, discuss what is and isn't feasible, and even answer some pretty interesting questions from the community. This summit was intended to be for leaders of in-game communities, but I think the information that was shared is really interesting, and I figured that there'd be a lot of people who'd want to be kept in the loop about this sort of thing. So in this video, I'll be going over 3 significant aspects of the summit. In the first part, I'll be sharing the creative director's observations about the recent survey that went out to all players about ESO's guild experience. In the second part of this video, I'll be sharing a summary of Rich Lambert's presentation that discussed some of the developers' future plans for guilds. And to wrap things up, I'll be highlighting a few of Rich's answers to the questions that were asked by attendees. There's lots to yap about. This is a very yapping-intensive video, so let's jump right into it. In October, the ESO developers sent out a survey to the community to collect feedback about players' experiences with guilds and what they'd like to see implemented in the future. It was the first time that the devs really did anything like that, and Rich suggested that they learned a lot from doing so. Just as an aside, I really hope they continue to engage with the community like this. What really stood out to Rich was that a vast majority of respondents, nearly 90% of them, shared that they were in multiple guilds with more than 100 players. The devs didn't realize that there were so many people in as many guilds that were that heavily populated. A lot of feedback was left that suggested that shared interests was the #1 reason to be in a guild, and that a majority of people are drawn to guilds because they want to find communities of people who all want to run the same kinds of content. The #1 thing that players indicated that they wanted was better guild communication tools, such as an improved guild chat experience and more sophisticated guild management options. Many guild masters, present company included, heavily rely on using Discord as a means to communicate with their guild mates and share information about important happenings or events because of the lack of communication tools that are in the actual game. A lot of respondents also shared that they'd really like there to be more of a reason for players to want to join guilds. As it stands, the most significant incentive to join a guild is to have access to the commerce side of the game, by way of listing items on a guild trader to sell to other players. Rich referred to this notion as being a mechanical reason to join a guild. Of course, there are many reasons why players would want to be in a guild, right? Such as to be social or to participate in group content like trials or PvP raids. But as it stands, having access to a guild trader is the only mechanical reason to join a guild. Players want there to be more of those. Rich concluded this segment of his presentation by stating that the feedback that they received from players was great because it proved to the developers that they've been on the same page as the player base, in the sense that they're already thinking about the same kinds of things that were brought up. And you'll know what I mean about this some more after this next segment. Rich Lambert prefaced his presentation by saying that he's aware that he's going to come off as pretty evasive at times when sharing information with us, but that's because he doesn't want to make any promises and that he wants to reiterate that these things take time and there are pitfalls to account for. The devs are very much in the planning stages for a lot of things at the moment, but they'd still be keen to share some of those plans with us for the sake of improving communication between the team and the players, and personally, that's always something I can get behind. Some things that the developers would like to improve upon would be to create tools to run guilds better. Some examples include improving the guild finder tool such that it will allow players to actually have the ability to search for the name of a guild, something that's not currently possible. The current guild finder tool is kinda cheeks, if I'm being honest with you. The devs are also looking into creating tools to better allow players to directly talk to guild members, and tools that can make it easier to inform guild members of things that are going on around the guild, without being social banned because you sent too many in-game mails to players. This is why I've personally used Discord to send out these guild-wide updates. I'm not trying to catch a ban for using an add-on to send out 500 mails to players to remind them that the RP event is happening at the guild hall later tonight, you feel? So that's great that they're looking into this. Rich shared in the Q&A segment that a new way to communicate with the entire guild may not even be added by means of the mail system. It could potentially be a calendar or something else entirely. Nevertheless, the concept of being able to easily message or tell your guildmates what's coming up in the guild are all on this proverbial list of improvements that the devs are working on. The devs are also looking into potentially creating tools to be able to help run events within the guild better, such as raffles or scavenger hunts. They know that players want guild halls to receive some improvements, such as being able to host more players in them, but the devs shared that addressing guild halls will be a little more difficult just because of how this could potentially affect performance. Despite this, Rich said that this may be something that they can look into. Lastly, the notion of guild progression was brought up. This is a feature that's been heavily requested, and if implemented, it would consist of things like guild-specific achievements that would allow guilds to unlock certain tools with different functionalities. Think of leveling up a guild the way one would level up a character. A lot of cool ideas are just now being dug into by the development team to see what is and isn't possible, as well as determining when these things could be possible. Alright, the last segment of the Guild Summit that I attended was a Q&A session between the players and Rich Lambert. Prior to this meeting, the developers opened up a forum on the official ESO Discord server for Summit attendees to submit questions that they'd like to have answered. Gina picked the questions from the Q&A forum that had the most votes, and even allowed a few folks in the audience to take the stage and directly ask the developers questions right then and there. A lot of questions were asked, and I didn't take in-depth notes for everything, but I wanted to share a few standout questions and answers. Mind you, not all of them even pertain to guilds, which was kind of the point of this segment, but I still wanted to include a few of those responses anyways, just because I found them interesting. Someone asked what the developers' plans are for trading guilds. Since the game economy has really changed in the past few months, and this has posed many issues for these types of guilds. As a fellow trading GM myself, I really appreciated that this question was asked, as the steady decline in interest in trading among the community has definitely made it more challenging to keep the guild up and running at times. I can only imagine how much more challenging it would be for trading guilds who are up and coming or still finding their footing, or trading guilds who don't have the privilege of having a massive dedicated community that comes with the territory of being a content creator for ESO. Rich replied by saying that he gets this question a lot. One of the core components of guilds, mechanically, is having a guild trader, after all. Rich shared that the devs have been actively attempting to make things in the game easier for players to attain. They want to make players' lives easier in general, and in doing so, this has had ramifications on the in-game economy. There are no plans to implement any specific changes right this minute, but there are a lot of things that the devs are working on in terms of guild functionality in general that could apply to this situation, including guild traders. He said that this was a hint. When the devs talk about changes that are made to the game, especially when it comes to adding things that players want to buy and sell, they're constantly thinking about how players get this stuff and how they're going to use these things as an economic tool. He reiterated that a lot of the recent changes that have been made that significantly impacted trading, such as the new listing and mail timers, were done for the sake of performance. While we're on the topic, a player asked about other limitations that impact players' experiences in guilds, such as the 500 guild member limit and the 30 guild store slot limit. They were wondering why these limits exist and if they could ever change. Rich replied by stating that, again, these limits exist because of performance issues. The devs want to make sure that things don't ever get out of hand for players. He brought up player mail as an example. Players were really upset when the developers recently enforced the mail expiration timer that hadn't been previously enforced. This is because back then, there were people with over 50,000 expired mails just chilling in their mailbox. Their server mail storage was in the terabytes, but when they enforced the expiration, the storage was then in the gigabytes, which made a massive difference. The same could be said about the recent changes to guild listings. Previously, an item could be listed for 30 days, but now you can only keep an item listed for 14. Doing so significantly reduced the amount of load and storage, according to Rich. Being in more than 5 guilds would also put a lot of strain on the server. He explained this with very technical terms that I didn't quite get the chance to note down properly, so I'm not going to try to hash together what little I caught from his reply in the event that I end up saying something incorrect. But I do want to agree with a point that Rich made, which is that the developers could do a better job at explaining these things. Rich was saying something about how a player's status has to be updated every time they log in, and that being in 5 guilds would cause more strain on the server because of this. And it's stuff like that that I wish was more clearly communicated in patch notes or forum announcements about these changes to clear up any confusion players may have about why going through with these drastic changes are a net positive for the game. Someone asked if the devs are going to look into improving guild tabards. They'd like to be able to hide tabards under non-costume designs. Rich said that the short answer is that the way tabard functionality is set up is that it's like a switch. If you are in the guild of the tabard that you put on, that's the only way it knows what guild you're in. If the tabard is off or if it's hidden, then it wouldn't get that information. It sounds weird, but that's just the way it is implemented, and it'd be really tricky to change. Guild tabards are on the list of things to look at and maybe fix, but it's not a high priority. Someone brought up guild housing, and that it'd be nice to be able to manage housing as a guild management team, as opposed to just having one individual person managing the entire guild hall. Rich shared that the team hears about this a lot, and it's definitely something that could be looked into. Unfortunately, sorting this out can be a bit tricky because the legality of who owns the home is significant. When push comes to shove, someone has to own the guild hall, so who would that be, right? Someone mentioned that a lot of guild masters deal with hundreds of members all the time and are constantly hearing the feedback that members have about the game. Thus, they're wondering how GMs and officers connected to these communities can help the developers improve the game. Gina shared that guild staff are more than welcome to send notes and the like to herself. Rich added to this by saying that he's happy to read through any documents the players may send his way, but that he'd appreciate that they're put together in a thoughtful manner and that they call out pain points and issues that players are facing as opposed to focusing so much on solutions. He shared that players and devs alike can sometimes get so caught up in solutions, they forget to actually solve the problem at hand. Jess also chimed in to share that players can use the following email address to send in feedback, and Kevin said he'd be happy to receive DMs from players. Someone asked if it'd be possible to ever receive an NPC like the banker or the merchant to access the guild bank and trader from anywhere, or be able to access these things from a player home. This comes down to the design philosophy. If players could access the trader or guild bank from anywhere, then there would be less reason to go to towns and cities, which would go against what the developers want, which is for towns and cities to feel alive and populated. The devs know players would be drawn to the path of least resistance and would put all of this functionality into their player homes to have a one-stop shop, and they don't want that to be the case. As is the case anytime I've attended a dev Q&A, someone asked if the devs could ever raise the furnishing cap in homes or guild halls. And as always, Rich reminded us that they can't really do this because of performance problems. The devs have to be careful so that players don't get into a state where they crash every time they try to load into their home because they surpass the memory. But the devs are still trying to find ways to do this. Someone asked if the devs could give guilds more functionality in Cyrodiil. As it stands, claiming a keep in Cyrodiil for your guild doesn't do a whole lot besides allow players to access the guild store there, and you'll see the guard NPC sporting the guild's tabard. Rich said that at the moment, the team in charge of Cyrodiil have their hands full with the upcoming Vengeance campaign. If the test is not successful and the team does not see the performance improvements that they want, or if the player base is just really not vibing with this new campaign, then they'll have to go back to the drawing board and continue to focus on these goals that improve performance. But if the test is successful, then the team can open up the floodgates about other neat things that could be going on in Cyrodiil, including potentially the role of guilds in this PvP zone. Alright, let's wrap up with some non-guild related questions. A player brought up how unpleasant it is to play with high ping where they live, and if it'd be possible to have a server for Southeast Asia. The ESO servers are not like traditional MMO servers, where there's a pod where everything is specific to that, such as the world and community. I'm just paraphrasing what Rich said, by the way, so I'm sorry if some things are kinda unclear. The ESO servers are not isolated small things. In fact, the servers are giant, so building another one would take a lot of time and it'd be very expensive. Rich implied that when the servers are opened, the community has to be able to support all of that, and I got the impression from what he was saying that this wouldn't be the case if they were to open up a Southeast Asia server. I think this is a good question to end things on. Someone asked, will this game be around in 5 years? Rich replied with a question of his own. Would we do Cyrodiil Champions if we were just going to put the game on life support? No. He elaborated by saying that the Cyrodiil Champions initiative is taking a lot of time and resources, and it's only in the test state. The developers wouldn't commit to doing something as wacky as that if the game were to go into hibernation anytime soon. He assured us that the devs are committed to the game. I'm gonna keep it a stack. As someone who frequently uses her platform to share with you guys the insights that I have the privilege of learning about because of my presence in the community, I always wince anytime I share optimistic or reassuring news like this, because I often get absolutely ass-blasted in the fucking comments by really jaded players who say all sorts of whack-ass shit about me. So I'm gonna make it very clear right now that I'm aware of the state of the ESO community in recent times. Your feelings of frustration or uncertainty or disagreements are totally fair, and if you want to share those opinions in the comments, that's totally cool, of course. But don't start dragging me for no reason, or else I'm gonna put a pipe bomb in your mailbox. Okay, sorry for crashing out there. Now that that is out of my system, I want to really emphasize that I appreciated having the opportunity to attend this guild summit and then share what was discussed there with all you guys. Like the rest of you all, I've been wanting the devs to be more transparent with the player base and improve their communication efforts, and to me, hosting a summit like this is a pretty excellent way to accomplish just that. This is something that I hope the developers continue to look into, and I think it'd be really neat if they extended these kinds of initiatives to encompass the other important elements of the game, such as raiding or PvP. But that's it from me. How are y'all feeling about the future plans for ESO guilds and some of the answers to the Q&A sesh? Feel free to sound off in the comments below. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you YouTube members for the additional support, as always, and I'll see ya in the next video. Cheers.